All right, well, let's introduce the Unit 2 in more detail. What we're going to do here, this is going to bother me because my door is slightly ajar, and it's going to bother me a lot. So hold on. That's so much better. All right, Unit 2, U.S. as a global power. What we're going to do is talk about some concepts that will be very important in this unit, and then we will talk a little bit about Syria and get you going to talk about the Syria stuff. That is the topic for Tuesday. Let's get started. Remember that the question that you will be answering in October sometime is this one. Considering its economic and political strength, should the U.S. favor isolationism or globalism today based on historical events? So we see here that we have to figure out what isolationism is, we have to figure out what globalism is, and then we have to run through historical events that will help us to understand which option we should choose. Which option you think is best for the United States is going to be totally up to you. I just want to give you some of the tools to think through this problem. So let's define isolationism first. What is it? Well, it's a policy of remaining apart from the affairs or interests of other groups, especially the political affairs of others. So in other words, the United States stays out of other countries' business. Okay, be neutral. If there's problems in another country, so what? Leave it for them. It's not our business. Two countries on the other side of the world decide to go to war. Good for them. Leave them alone. Let them do it. That's isolationism. The United States should not get too involved in the rest of the world. So what does isolationism mean in a little bit more detail? In leaving countries alone, even if they have a dictator who's doing terrible things, to the people in that country, it's still better for us to stay out, right? In two countries go to war, we let them work it out. And we should not make any agreements with other countries, alliances that entangle us and commit us to certain things. So it's very common for two countries to get together and say, hey, if somebody hits you, we're going to join in the fight on your side. And if somebody hits us, you can join in on the fight on our side, that kind of thing. Very common for countries to do it. If you're an isolationist, you don't want to do that very much. You think that's bad news because you don't want to get drawn into somebody else's fight. Okay. Now, isolationists are not pacifists. They do believe that war could be necessary sometimes, but really only when there's a direct national interest involved. We'll talk about what that means later. So isolationists want to stay out of people's business and just kind of focus in on your own country and on doing your own thing in your own country. Okay. So have we ever been isolationist? Has that ever happened? Kind of. We have never totally been isolationist, but we have been more isolationist in the past. In early American history, which I'll talk about later in another day, in early American history, the United States tried to stay out of European alliances and tried not to get into wars with other European countries. So that was something that was very important to early American foreign policy. And then between after we got involved in World War I and before World War II, America was isolationist then too. We got involved in World War I, and a lot of people were not happy about how that ended. And so a lot of Americans said, you know what, this whole globalist thing, we're not going to do it. We're going to go back to isolationism. So it has happened a couple times in American history. Okay, so let's take a look at the next bit here, which is what is globalism. Globalism has many different definitions. We're going to use one that's really just going to fit what we're talking about in this unit. And for this unit, globalism is going to mean the idea that the United States should take the lead in solving global problems. Okay, that in solving global problems, we should also try to support other democracies, democratic countries around the world. That means countries that have votes and voting as a way of determining leaders. We should also support governments that recognize human rights. So, you know how we have this Bill of Rights, like freedom of speech, and police need a warrant to search you, all those rights. We should try to support countries who give those rights to their citizens or who respect those rights in their citizens. That's another thing we should do. And of course, we should try to have a capitalist system around the world so that it's very easy for you to make something in America and sell it wherever, or you can buy something from halfway around the world very easily. This idea of big companies and small, but mostly big companies being able to trade across borders without anyone stopping them, that too is part of globalism. So globalism is about the world connecting through trade, and it's also for the United States about taking the lead in solving a lot of problems, and in particular in supporting democracy and human rights. So what this means in practice, if you are a globalist or if you're favoring America, as another word is interventionist, you would look at a few things here. So let's take a look at them. If there's a country out there and their leader is harming their people, we should try to do something, okay? There are many possible things we could do, up to and including invading the country and removing that leader from power, which is what happened in Iraq. So anyway, we should try to do something to help people in a country if that country's leaders are harming the citizens of that country. Okay. So that an isolationist would say no to that, right? Okay. Another thing is that we should try to build alliances and agreements with everyone for trade and security. We should get into a big club with a lot of people in it and say, hey, members of this club, we will all protect each other, right? If anyone gets out of line and tries to attack any one of us, we will all gang up on that person. So if you are on the globalist side, you like the idea of not just one or two alliances or friendships with countries, but try to get as many countries into a friendship, into an alliance, into an organization together to work together. All right. And that finally, something like climate change is a problem that's affecting the globe. And if you're a globalist in the American situation, you think that America should really take the lead in solving a problem like climate change. If America takes a leadership role, people will like us and respect us more. We will be able to do more good in the world if we lead it. Okay, so that's what globalism means in a few ways. So when have we been globalists? Well, we are right now. And we have been since the end of World War II. That's when America became a superpower. By World War II, transformed America into a super duper power, the most powerful country on earth, with the Soviet Union being behind. But but it was World War II that really did that for the United States. We did have early imperialism, which we'll talk about later in the week, when we took colonies, fought in World War I. But we haven't been truly dominant in the world until World War II, which transformed America into the superpower. So that's when we've been globalist. So there's another concept that we need to talk about before we get on to other things, and that is national interest, because you will hear this in the news. Should we get involved in a war? Should we help this country out? What should we be doing around the world? And you will find people on the news saying, well, what is in our national interest? And globalists and isolationists disagree about what American national interest is. And I want to talk a little bit about, there are two different ideas about what our national interest is. So when you look at, if you're an isolationist, you think really there are only two things in American national interest. One is security from attack. Security from attack. So we have to make sure that nobody invades the country, right? So we will do whatever we need to do to make sure nobody invades us, nobody hits us, nobody attacks us. And if they do, then we hit back. Then the other thing too is to some extent, we need to do business around the world. We need to sell and buy things around the world. If some other country is really stopping our ability to do that in a very serious way, that could be a cause for war. We could go to war with another country if they're stopping us, because like I uh, I got a flat panel TV, like, well, they're all flat panels now, but I got like one of those, a smart TV. I got a smart TV, and it's Samsung, so it's a Korean company. If any country gets in the way of the Koreans delivering Samsung TVs here, I say we go to war because I love that TV. It's amazing. Okay. So anyway, an isolationist wants to stay out of the world, but if some other country is preventing us from doing business and living prosperously, then that could be a sign that we should be going to war. And I can't even tell you, like, the whole, I just like that TV. I don't know why. I don't know why. Because of the COVID thing. You spend a lot of time at home. I've never spent so much time at home, in the last 6 months. So, yeah. Okay. So, what is national interest from a globalist perspective? Um, well, it's more than that. So, if you're a globalist, you agree with the isolationist perspective on those two things. Those two things are important things, but then you add this in addition. Okay. So what do you add in addition to just the security of the country and trade? You think, if you are a globalist, it's important for the United States to help other countries around the world become more democratic. Okay, if a democracy is around, you want to support and be friendly to the democracy. And you want to help encourage countries change from non-democratic to democratic. Okay, so looking at the second one, there's 2 points. One is you want to make sure that countries that don't have democracy, like China, Russia, which Russia kind of does, but it's, but certainly China doesn't, certainly North Korea doesn't, right? You want to make sure that those kinds of countries don't get too powerful. Okay. You want the world to be a big club of democracies, and you want new members all the time. Okay. You also want countries to respect human rights. You want countries to allow people to vote, to allow people to speak and to worship whatever religion they want to do, stuff like that. Okay. So you also think it's important to use American power to bring about human rights in the world, to support democratic countries around the world, and to make sure that non-democratic countries don't get too powerful. If you look here, this is an Afghan woman who voted in one of those first elections in 2001. After 9/11, we went into Afghanistan and it invaded the country, got rid of the government that was there called the Taliban, which was not a democracy. And then when we got rid of that government, we put the democracy in there, and have been trying to do that ever since. And this is an example of a lady voting. This is just ink that they put on your finger so that it just sort of proves that you voted, so that you can't vote twice, So anyway, of course, before 9/11, the Taliban did not allow women to vote. They didn't really allow anyone to vote, but they especially wouldn't allow women to vote because of how that regime worked. And so a globalist says American power should be used to bring this about. Okay, an isolationist says it's not our business to get other countries to vote. A globalist says, yes, it is. It's good for us to do that. Okay, so that is a globalist perspective. And then there's a final thing to consider, which is humanitarian interests. And this is the idea that even if a disaster strikes somewhere with a big earthquake, a tsunami, whatever, the United States should help, give money, give food, stuff like that. In some areas where there's a big disaster or there's a war going on, if people are running from that area, they're refugees, they're running, we should take them in and allow them to live here in the United States. So that's another set of interests there too, that we should help with big disasters, right? Okay. So all of that kind of leads us to the situation that's happening in Syria right now, which is what's going on in Syria. I knew you were asking me that, and that's why I have the slide. One moment, please. Okay. So, what is going on in Syria? Okay. So for a while, the last 10 years or so, there's been a big civil war going on in Syria. Syria here's in the Middle East, Iraq's over here, Israel's down there, and Lebanon and Jordan. So this is the Middle East, Turkey up there. Uh, Big civil war that's been going on. The president, whose name is Assad, Bashar al-Assad, is trying to hold on to power in the country, and the rebels are trying to take power away from Assad and set something else up. This war has been really bad. It got really bad in 2015. Over 500,000 refugees left Syria for Europe. So they started walking into Turkey, hoping to get into Europe, or they got on boats and started heading into Europe. So that was a huge deal when it happened. This is a major problem for the world, because when you have a war like this and people want to run away, if you're next door, you're the next door neighbor country, now you got a problem because they're going to keep running into your country. What do you do about them? So that's what's happening in Syria, is that you've got this civil war. There's going to be the next video, which is who is fighting who in Syria. That's the next one I want you to watch. It is a difficult video to follow, so I'm not going to make an Ed puzzle out of it, but I do want you to watch it because it's interesting, and it shows you just how, well, really how crazy the situation is, how there are so many different interested parties fighting in this civil war in Syria, and how does the United States fit in to that. So as you watch that video, don't feel like you need to memorize every single bit of it. What I just want you to do is come away with the feeling of what a complicated situation this is, and what should the United States do about this, if anything. Should we just stay out, or should we pick a side in all of that? So that's just kind of what I want you to do. And don't worry about making sure that you understand every little piece of it. So just get that general sense of it. Okay. So, and then there's going to be another video about the refugee situation in particular that you can watch. So, so we're going to leave it there, and you can move on to the next bit of the assignments.